So I want to start with the first smart guy, maybe the smartest of them all, was a guy by the name of Aristotle. Aristotle's principles of persuasion. The first, maximize your salient points and minimize your weaknesses. Now, maximizing your salient points doesn't mean asking the same stupid question over and over. It means having a theme. And when you're proving that theme, you come at that theme from every different direction. You come at it with lay witnesses, expert witnesses, documentary evidence, demonstrative evidence, and your pleadings, all the proof that you can have from pleadings. And those things all go together to maximize the salient point by supporting your theme. Then your theme is the central part of your story. And you may have two themes in your story. You may have a damages theme and a causation theme. But that's what's meant by maximize your salient points. Minimize your weaknesses. We all have weaknesses in our case. So you figure out primarily through the use of focus groups is the best way I know to figure it out. But you figure out through the use of focus groups, what are your weaknesses in your case? They'll tell you about weaknesses you had no idea you had in your case. And I've been shocked by weaknesses that focus groups have told me that I have in my cases. But then you minimize your weaknesses. You bring them up early. You bring them up before the defense has an opportunity to, because when you bring them up, you get to put your spin on them. And you only get one chance to make a first impression. You want the first impression of your weaknesses to be your spin, your version of your weaknesses. Plus, the fact that you bring it up means that you're not worried about it. You're not concerned about this weakness. And so just take it head on. Aristotle also said, refresh the memory of your audience frequently. Now, that again comes right back to theming. Refresh from every different direction, every way you can tell the same story, and with refreshing through your documentary evidence, and then come back and support it with expert testimony, support it with lay testimony. But the repetition doesn't mean just repeating the same thing over and over. It means repetition of your theme. It means repetition of the essence of your case, repetition of your causation theme. Now, finally, he said, execute the required level of emotion. Now, this is where we fail most miserably. The word most frequently used to describe jury service is what? Boring. Yeah, just like this speech. Boring.
No, not this.
Yeah, okay, I'm demonstrating it for you as I speak. Boring is the word most frequently used by jurors because they come in with this high expectation that they watch all this fascinating trials on TV. And boy, these trials look like fun. This is going to be a blast. And then they get in there and we absolutely bore them to tears. Now, there's a time for emotion, though, and we have to be very careful. In this age of tort reform, we have to be very careful that we do not use emotion so as to play into the image of the greedy trial lawyer in using emotion. You don't want to use emotion in voir dire examination. You don't want to use it in opening statement. You want to use emotion after the jury is convinced that there's liability in this case, after you've made your liability proof. Usually I save emotion, the true emotional appeal, until the closing portion of the closing argument, at a time when the defense has no opportunity to respond to it. And also that's the concept of recency. That's what the jury remembers when they go into the jury room. So now, Aristotle also said three major things: logos, pathos, and ethos. Competence, dynamism, and trustworthiness. Interesting, this was 2,300 years ago. 3 years ago, there was a study done among 1,500 actual jurors in debriefings across the country, 1,500 actual civil trial jurors. And they found, one of the questions they asked was, did you like the lawyer? And then for the three people that said they did, they asked them, well, what did you like about your lawyer? What makes people like lawyers? And just like Aristotle said 2,300 years ago, one, trustworthy, and these are not in any particular order, but trustworthiness, competence, and dynamism. Competence means you don't waste my time. And this is true with judges as well as jurors. You get in there, you don't know the predicates for getting the document into evidence, and you stumble around and you're shuffling around paper, and the judges say, all right, you may proceed. Okay, so well, yeah, and you don't know what you're doing. Competence. They want you to move with competence. You act as if you know what you're doing, and you demonstrate that you know what you're doing. Then dynamism. That means you keep them awake. There's a thing called a trigger or an anchor. You want your anchor to be that when the judge calls your name, something happens. When the judge says, Mr. Dees, you may proceed. When the jury hears, you want this literally to be an anchor. When the jury hears Mr. Dees, they unconsciously, in the unconscious mind, they think, okay, I've got to listen now because something is about to happen. You know how you create that anchor? When your name is called, you make something happen. You don't go in with, now let me see, did I understand that you just testified to this, and then you said this, and then you said this, and the jury's saying, yeah, you stupid ass, I heard it. That's exactly what he just said. We all heard it. You got anything else to add? No, when your name is called, make something happen. Be dynamic. All right, the next thing is education. I added this one because there's absolutely no question we like the people who educate us. When you walk into jury service, you know absolutely nothing about what you're there for. When I first got called to jury duty, I went back and changed. After being on, I didn't get to serve, but I went all the way through a voir dire examination. And when I went back and changed the way I did voir dire examination because I had a new perspective. I had a perspective from the viewpoint of the juror. And they call the people that take care of the jurors, in Houston we call them jury shepherds. And the reason they're called jury shepherds is because that's how they treat the jurors. They're like sheep. And when you come over there, you're told where to sit, you're told what to do, you're told to move into this group, now you follow us across the street, now you take this out. They lead you around. All this time, you have no idea if you are there to take a child away from a parent, if you're there to put a drunk driver in jail, if you're there to award one of those multi-million-dollar verdicts that you get every day at the courthouse. They have no idea why you're there because there's such a plethora of things that jurors can do in this country. So when they finally come in, the judge says a few words to them, and that varies according to the judge. But then you stand up on voir dire examination. You're the first person who actually gets the opportunity to educate the jury as to why they're there, what's expected of them, and then you follow through with that on your opening statement. Tell them what their role is and exactly what's going to. You start off. We have the opportunity to begin as the educator, and we like people who enlighten us. So the next issue, trusting the lawyer. The way you gain trust, and this is very important, it's called sequencing. The way we gain trust is how we sequence information. In what order do we put our information now? And what we have to do now is you can't stand up and play into the tort reformers' widely disseminated vision of what a trial lawyer is all about, the greedy trial lawyer. So you want to start, you have to understand, we've done all this work on jury bias. And we're told by jurors and by lots of focus groups, first of all, we know that they don't trust us going in. They don't trust the people representing the plaintiff. They don't trust the plaintiff. That's just the basic fact. The jurors go in suspicious of plaintiffs and suspicious of plaintiffs' lawyers and suspicious of all lawyers for that matter. Remember, it's not just the plaintiff's lawyers they're suspicious of, but they're more suspicious of us because we represent the plaintiffs of whom they're very suspicious. So what you want to do is sequence your proof in such a way that you fortify your words. The part of your case that you come out with early on liability generally is you want to follow it immediately with documentation. You want to follow it with hard evidence, not just your words. You use your words, but then you bring documents, you bring graphs, you bring whatever hard evidence you have in your case to fortify what you've just said, so it's obvious that you're telling the truth. This is not just rhetoric. It's not hyperbole. You're actually supporting what you're saying as you go. And then I always like the military method of teaching, and I use the same thing with a jury. And the military method of teaching is you tell them what you tell them, then you tell them, and then you tell them what you're going to tell them, then you tell them what you told them. That's the military method of teaching. We tell them what our case is about. We tell them what it's going to be. Now, we have to be very, very careful now, since they are suspicious of us. We have to be very careful in that first part of telling them what this case is about, telling them what the evidence will show. You know, we got into the routine before we figured out what we were doing about predicating everything by saying, especially on opening, the evidence will show, the evidence will show, the evidence will show. That's not the way to do it for this reason. How many of you have ever tried a case in which every single thing went on in the case exactly the way you expected it to, and you got absolutely no surprises? If you're going to say anything, you have to say, we hope to hell the evidence will show. Because it's not going to. So whatever you do in this age of suspicion, do not make promises. And when you say to a jury, the evidence will show, they're going to be listening for that evidence. And then that witness changes their mind, or the evidence doesn't go in the way you think, now you've damaged your own trustworthiness. So be careful about making promises. The other thing is avoid overloading. Avoid over-trying your case. Avoid putting on way too much evidence to support the same proposition, because, as you'll see, the overload plays to the disadvantage of the plaintiff. Avoid overreaching or over-trying your case. Here's a simple suggestion for you. Try the case you have, not the case you wish you had. If you got a $200,000 case, try a $200,000 case, not $1 million case. If you've got a case that involves where your client has their injuries, they had injuries, they were injured, they lost time from work, they had medical bills, and now they've recovered, they're back at work, they no longer have the pain and suffering, that's the case you try. You don't go into that case and claim lifetime mental anguish, lifetime physical pain and suffering, because that's exactly how you play into the role model of the greedy trial lawyer. So try the case you have.